Diablo 2 has been around for a while, but with the release of Diablo 2's Resurrected form, there will likely be a lot of players new to the experience. Last time we talked about getting through normal on the Sorceress using fire. This time we're going to talk about Nightmare and Hell as either a solo self-found or as a just really unlucky Sorceress. In this budget build, we'll assume that you had terrible luck and didn't find any good uniques or sets, so you need to have some easily farmable items to fill in the gaps, and we'll introduce a second element to make dealing with immunes significantly easier. Going into Nightmare difficulty as a fire sorceress, you're likely to be sitting at about 50 to 60 strength, maybe slightly higher if you found some good gear that required it. This should be good enough for most of the game unless you get some slightly higher requirement gear later on. The rest of your points should be into vitality, though if you did put a handful into energy in normal, it's not the end of the world. Just know your mana problems will probably be solved pretty easily in Nightmare if you use the right Mercenary. Skill-wise, if you followed the earlier guide, you'll likely have your 1-point wonders, static field, and teleport, as well as likely is just 1 point in warmth just because it's handy. As far as your fire skills themselves, you'll likely have a decent mix of fireball, firebolt, and a few extra points in fire mastery. As you go through Nightmare, you'll want to round these out and try out Meteor as well, since it's a fireball synergy and can be fun to play with. Though that's a bit later game in terms of getting it to a useful level, unless you want to spend your Nightmare respec on just getting it out. The big factor is, probably by Act 3 Nightmare, you'll have wanted to start moving into your second element for helping with immunities. This means getting down to Frozen Orb. And if you feel your Fireball is killing fast enough before Act 3, moving to Frozen Orb earlier is better. I generally aim to have at least double-digit Orb with a point in Mastery by Act 5 Nightmare, and max Orb still with only 1 point in Mastery by the time I make it to Hell. Don't bother with the Orb synergy though, you'll want the rest of that boosting your Fireball or Meteor for Hell. The gameplay strategy pretty much just boils down to casting Orb to slow down enemies and spam them with Fireball unless they have Fire Immune, in which case you want to line up the Orb's Flourish, or basically the end of its path, with the Fire Immune enemy you want to kill. You can practice this anywhere, but oddly enough, the places I prefer are the Fallen camps in Act 1, since they're always Fire Immune, are generally chaotic with things running everywhere, and you can practice picking off the Shamans with Orbs, while all the little Fallen run around causing chaos, and generally, as long as something is dying there, they're not too dangerous. As with the other budget guides, the vast majority of what people will be looking for after skills is equipment. Let's actually knock the mercenary equipment out first, since they're honestly pretty important. In the armor and helmet, you simply want to aim for resists and leech, whether this is blood crafts or rune words like treachery or duress, and a random worm skull or undead crown you found in normal, it doesn't matter, just resists and life leech, since for the most part you'll be trying to keep your mercenary out of battle. The weapon is the most important part though, and that is insight. You can make cheap insights out of polearms found in cows or in various places in Nightmare. Just any non-magical 4-socket polearm will do, and you throw Ral, Tear, Tal, and Soul into it, and your mana problems will be pretty much solved. Obviously, this involves going after an Act 2 Mercenary. The best one you're going to have for the Sorceress is going to easily be the Holy Freeze Mercenary from Act 2 Nightmare. Yes, the defensive one. As far as player equipment, we'll actually be in a fairly similar bolt to the budget gear for the Bone Mancer, with jewelry focusing on faster cast, resist, mana, and life, which are easily gambled or found by this point. Though faster cast is not as important for this build since you're using Orb along with it, it does still help a great deal if you are relying on the Fireball rather than the Meteor. Similarly, you can be using gambled rares or crafted boots and gloves to get resist and stats as well, and maybe a bit of movement speed on the boots specifically. You could also be using safety crafts if you really need that extra resist. Where it's a lot easier to smooth things out through active means are rune words and specific crafting recipes. One of the better crafted recipes for early on is getting a magic shark skin or vampire fang belt and using a perfect amethyst, an ith rune, and a random jewel. This giving you a pinch of faster cast and a handful of rare effect rolls. Similarly, you can use this formula on an amulet, though you can find these mods on amulets naturally. Unlike the belt, it does give guaranteed bits of faster cast, though you won't be getting top-end mods until higher levels, so while you may get +1 all skills, you likely won't see +2 until post-game. The formula for amulets specifically is also fairly cheap though, so it doesn't hurt. It's basically a magic amulet, a Ral rune, a perfect amethyst, and a jewel. Craft them together and you get a crafted amulet with faster cast. It's kind of hit or miss though. Last up are your rune words. In your main hand, the easiest weapon for the Sorceress is going to be Spirit. There really isn't anything comparable outside of an amazing roll on a rare orb or a unique you could find. And even in those cases, Spirit won't be bad. To make it, you need a 4-socket sword, and you can get that from normal cows with a Larzik quest. Wow. I can speak, or in Nightmare just by keeping an eye out for broadswords. It's recommended to stick with low requirement swords like crystal swords and broadswords just to keep your strength in check. Though in Nightmare, be careful where you get a crystal sword from if you're going that route, since unlike broadswords, Larzik can take them up to 6 sockets if they're too high item level, resulting in a wasted item and a quest for the most part. The runes for Spirit are fairly easy to find from normal Countess, being in this order: Tal, Thul, Ort, and Am. You just stick them in there, and it's good. It gives you faster cast, +2 skills, and a few other really nice mods. In terms of armor, the list is also fairly short, but similarly to the Necro build, I generally just use stealth until I find a better unique. But if you find yourself hurting for resist, a couple armors can help, but the most resist-focused one is going to be Smoke, which is Neff and Lum in a 2-socket body armor. Unfortunately, the Sorceress rune word specifically, it's called Enlightenment, is kind of junky outside of +2 skills, so I cannot recommend it in this case. There are situations where it can be useful, but this just isn't one of them. Shield-wise, you likely won't be seeing a 4-socket shield until late hell for the Sorceress, so Spirit is a bit out of the question. Even though it is relatively cheap to do in a Monarch shield, there's also how much strength that it takes as well. So instead, it's usually recommended to go Shale Eth in a Bone Shield for Rhyme, since it provides Cannot Be Frozen and OK Resists. If you need more resist though, Ancient's Pledge is a solid option if you want cheap, or you can go the more expensive Sanctuary route with Coco Maul, though I usually don't like those that much because I want to save my runes. Splendor is also an option with Eth and Lum, but really if you're going for that, I would usually just wait and get a late game Monarch. It's cheaper and has better mods. Last up is the helmet, and again, I'm going to go straight to the lore recommendation: Ort, Soul, in any 2-socket helmet. With +1 skills, good lightning resist, and a pinch of mana per kill, it's really hard to beat. A recommendation made on the Necro Guide also would go okay here, and that is, if you're extremely flush with cash, gambling some circlets can garner interesting results, such as faster cast and plus skills, but I would always have the idea of lore as a backup plan, and probably save a chunk of that gold for after you get higher level, for reviving the Mercenary, etc. So gamble a bit, but don't blow it all on an item hunt just yet. But yeah, lore is your best bet unless you get one of the various good uniques that you can put on your head. And that's generally how I get through hell, and this is a special shout out to the patrons, channel members, and Twitch subscribers, both Prime and Normal, for the support that makes these videos actually possible.